The Harryman Show.
Welcome to the Harryman Show number 40. We have a very renowned drummer on today. His name is Jason Gianni. He is an instructor at the Drummers Collective up in New York. He's played in countless great acts, such as Rock of Ages. He's even done the theme song for SpongeBob SquarePants, and many more that we will discuss. How you doing, Jason?
Good morning. How you doing? Thanks for having me on, man.
Oh, yeah. A little funny story we were discussing for the show. I reached out to you, and I recognized your name and your photos and stuff like that. And you said you were seeing the podcast here and there, and that was actually a huge compliment from you, coming from a guy like you.
Oh, thanks, man. No, this is great, and it's people like you who keep these things going. That is a very big part of the wheel of our industry and keeping it moving, especially during this crazy time we're in right now.
Yeah, and there's people are obviously on a slower time right now, so a lot of people are more anxious to get back out there and talk about it. So it's all good stuff.
Sure.
All right, so I want to talk about what you're currently playing recently. You're currently playing with Rock of Ages, the Broadway show.
Yeah, well, so my situation is that I'm playing with a variety of different things that sort of kind of go in and go out and that sort of thing. And Rock of Ages is one of the things that I am working with right now. I am not the regular drummer of Rock of Ages. A guy by the name of John Weber, who's a fantastic New York drummer, has been in the drum chair since the beginning of when Rock of Ages came to New York, which actually had originated and was doing its early forms of the show in L.A. And a couple of my friends were doing it in L.A. And then a couple of years into, maybe 3 years into the show, I started subbing over there. And then John ended up having some really bad back injury issues. And so myself and a couple other subs really started working a lot in the show. And then after a while, what ended up happening, I did the national tour. International tour, where we went all over the country, went to Canada. I actually spent a month in Singapore with the show, which was great. And then the show went off Broadway for a little while. Actually went off completely, and now it is off Broadway, if that makes sense, which is just a smaller theater off Broadway. So yes, currently right now I am subbing on Rock of Ages, but as you know, because of COVID, everything is shut down. Broadway has been shut down for a year and will be to at least, I think, the next fall or something like that.
Yeah, I hear that being the common trend. Everyone's kind of hoping for July to October is when we all kind of get to go back out there. But
yeah, we'll see.
So in the downtime, are there still rehearsals? Are you still keeping the blade sharp with that? Or, are you still practicing some of the songs and all that stuff?
Yeah, I don't really need to, just because I've done the show for like the last 10 years. I have to kind of run it every once in a while. And I also simultaneously am subbing on Little Shop of Horrors as well on Broadway. Oh, yeah, and my great friend Dina Torriello, wonderful, wonderful drummer, has been doing that for a couple of years. And so I kind of had to sort of keep both at an arm's distance, not necessarily rehearsing on a regular basis, but sort of on an arm's distance. There's one thing about Rock of Ages that happens is that there's also something called the Rock of Ages live band. So what happens is we take the band on the road and we do a show, out in Vegas or, like that type of thing. And when we do those live shows, it's more the regular sort of cover versions of the songs that are in the show, which are different versions than what's in the show, because there's more like medley stuff in the show. So sometimes what I have to do is kind of toggle back and forth between, running what's going on in the show versus running the cover songs and go, oh yeah, that's right, this is this version. You get a little clogged up in your head, that sort of thing, But it helps to be a really good reader. So when you're on the show, you could just open up the book and just say, oh yeah, that's right, this is this part. I remember this. And, it doesn't take as much memory recognition, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Absolutely. And that's something I wanted to touch base with next. You're actually an instructor of the Drummers Collective now. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
All right. And how did that come about? How long have you been with that school?
So I actually studied at the Collective when I was 19 in 1992 or 3 or something like that. And I had just such an amazing experience there, connecting with the school and the people that taught there. And I even said at that time, one day I'm going to come back and teach here. And when I moved to California for about 10 years, which we might get into as far as history, I kept in touch with a lot of the people at school. So that by the time I came back, I said, I'm back in town, and sort of, reacquainted myself with them and that kind of thing. And by then I had done some things on a resume that kind of lit their light bulb a little bit. And they were like, oh, okay, let's get you in here and sub a couple classes. And sure enough, I subbed and, kind of took off from there. So I've been with them for 14 years now.
Oh, wow. That's a great stretch there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And due to recent events, the obvious, are you guys still doing in-person classes, or is it all online right now?
Yeah, so I'm actually involved in 3 schools. I'm with the Collective. I'm at the University of the Arts in Philadelphia, and I'm actually running their drum program for a few years. And I'm at the New School in New York City as well. Mm-hmm. And all 3 programs are wonderful programs, and they all have different kind of ways that they're dealing with the online, the situation we're in right now. I would say that, for me, mostly my stuff is online. But the Collective is starting to do like 25%, rhythm sections in person.
Okay.
So you have to go there and, they cut down the size of the classes, and they, everybody wears masks and all that kind of stuff. But the other schools, like New School and University of the Arts, are completely online 100%. Mm-hmm. So it's a weird thing where everyone's sort of trying to kind of get back on a little bit, mm-hmm. but not really there just yet,
And this is the question I've asked other instructors. Was it a big change for you doing online lessons, or was it something you were already used to?
That's a great question. It was somewhat of a big It was a little bit of a change in that I had done online lessons before. Mm. Not a lot. I mean, I'm an in-person kind of guy. I'm sure you feel the same way where, the human interaction is, we were talking about this before about like even just doing an interview. Uh-huh. It's better to be in the room with the person,
but you get to build you get to build excitement with the students as well when you're in person.
Sure. I mean, there's even just so much that I witnessed from a technique standpoint of just standing beside them or, next to them or under them and just seeing what is going on with the mechanics of their playing that you kind of miss a little bit online, Mm-hmm. And, but the one thing that has improved, well, 2 things. Number one, I was on the road for the last 2 years really consistently. So it's actually been nice being at home with my wife and daughter and spending a little bit more time just kind of chilling out, yeah. And then also the platform of the online, the way we've been doing things online has really improved a lot since the pandemic. Everything from Zoom, just everybody getting more used to Zoom. I was doing it like Skype or FaceTime before,
Yeah.
And getting used to Zoom and getting the tools down and sharing the screen and using the whiteboard. And then Yamaha had sent me the EAD product, and getting my sound better online and getting my students sound better online and having some different camera angles. Like, it's a way different game than it was before.
Yeah.
As far as online teaching, so it's actually been a pretty enjoyable process. I mean, I miss being in with people, but at the same time, I've enjoyed the way the process has improved over this period of time.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And now that we're talking about studies, you currently hold a master's degree that you got in Pennsylvania. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes.
And how you went there for about 4 to 6 years, I believe.
I went to the University of Delaware as an undergrad for 4 years.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. And then after Delaware, I went and I was offered an assistantship to teach at Penn State while I got my degree. So for 2 years there, I did my master's degree. I was teaching. I was the drum set teacher there while I was doing that. But my degree was in orchestral percussion. Oh, so wow. I studied all, mallets and timpani and all that kind of stuff while teaching drum set.
Nice. Now, I wanted to ask a question about the Drummers Collective. You correct me if I'm wrong. Was Freddie Gruber teaching there while you were there?
No, he was not. I believe that was a little bit before my time. I don't quite remember the years he was there. I want to say like the late 80s. Mm-hmm. And I don't remember if he was ever like a real consistent teacher as much as he was more of like we have a bunch of teachers that are like artists in residence, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
They kind of come in to teach a lesson here and there. Maybe do a clinic, maybe do a master class. Are a little bit more involved in the school that way. And I think Freddie was more that aspect. And I got to actually know Freddie, a couple of years before he died. Oh, he was a character, that guy.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was out of his mind, in a good way. But unfortunately I never worked with him, and that's, I regret that. It's too bad.
Well, the reason why I bring that up is because I know Drummer Collective is a very respected school and a long history, but growing up watching Neil Peart, he praised it in one of his DVDs how he studied under Freddie Rivers, and he held high praise for that school as well.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Neil, we'll go back and talk influences, but if, Rush was, my everything for a few years,
I could definitely hear him playing as well.
Thanks. Yeah. I've obviously expanded a lot out since then, but, for a long time, Neil was like my whole life there. And to have him, compliment the school the way he did and get behind it was, so cool. And the Freddie and Neil connection had nothing to do with the collective.
Oh, okay.
And, it was nothing like that. But I'll tell you, Freddie did quite a number in changing, the way Neil sat and the way he used, changed his technique, the traditional and the whole time thing. It was a very, very interesting changeover that Neil had in those years,
Yeah, the Test for Echo album was a big change for that band as well.
For sure, yeah.
All right, so going back to your origins, I know you're primarily a set player, but you integrate percussion and a lot. You do a lot of great ostinato stuff that I hear a lot of Bozio techniques. Did you start on a set, or were you kind of brought up with percussion? I know you said an orchestra background just now, but how did it start for you?
Great question. So actually, kind of a couple different categories here. First of all, I actually started on piano.
Okay.
And it was not as formal as the drum set stuff was. Mm-hmm. I had a cousin who was a classical pianist, so kind of getting to the point where he was getting a real reputation in the classical world. And I would sit down and play, and he would say, to my mom, "You got to get this kid some lessons." Mm-hmm. And my mom would say, "How do you know how to do that?" And I said, I don't really know. I'm just listening to something and playing it. And it turns out that I found out a little bit later that I had something close to perfect pitch. Mm-hmm. And that has carried through my life, where I studied piano in college and that sort of thing, but it's not my first instrument. As I started getting into drum sets, I started getting a lot more versatile styles. And after a while, the versatility of styles became a really big part of my MO, where I wanted to really get out there and play as much as I possibly could in as many different projects as I could. Mm-hmm. I thought that was not only satisfying for me musically, but also from a job perspective and opening yourself up to more people. I felt that would be, the better way to go, to make more contacts, to have a better business acumen, that sort of thing. And within that world, I started getting more into percussion and what the roles of the percussion were with, Afro-Cuban drumming, Brazilian drumming, of course, classical, what we talked about before. Mm. The funny thing about all this is that I am a horrendous hand drummer. Like I know everything about the rhythms, but I hit a conga once and I start crying because it hurts so bad.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. But I know all the rhythms and how they integrate with the styles and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And then, when the ostinato thing came along, and yes, Bozio was one of my favorite drummers and a humongous influence, I started getting more into the idea of, and it's cool that you bring up percussion, because this is sort of what I felt doing this, is that when I was composing a lot of the ostinato stuff, I would feel like a part of your body would be your percussionist, mm-hmm. and the other part of your body would be your drummer. Mm-hmm. So you're sort of accompanying yourself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
And my knowledge of percussion and the different sounds and that kind of thing all sort of kind of worked together, and it was more of a composition than just sort of an exercise or a, hey, look what I can do sort of thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, going into the set playing, I know you said Neil was a big influence for you. Did you start with the regular trend of starting with the big drum set, or did you start with a casual 4-piece?
So my first drum set was a late 70s Red Sparkle Ludwig.
Oh, nice.
I got it at a local music store in New Jersey here, and for the first couple of years, it was very sort of traditional 5-piece, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And right around that time was when I started to make a little bit more of a transition into the music that I like. Like I started off, with Kiss and your normal MTV. I started playing drums about a year after MTV started.
Mm-hmm.
So it was the whole all those songs of the early days and stuff like that. And then that's when I started to discover the more progressive bands, Kansas and Yes and Rush and those type of bands. And that definitely lit a fire under me to start building out the kit more. Mm-hmm. And my first band, my friends called it the Fungus because it was like every time they came downstairs, it would grow a little more.
That's pretty cool, actually.
So yeah, I did have that humongous kit for a while, and it was of course related to the styles of music that I liked and what we were writing back in high school and that sort of thing. But then in college, things really changed when my teacher in college, Tom Palmer, who's a wonderful, wonderful teacher out of Delaware, started getting me into jazz and jazz fusion, and I started getting into Weckl and Kalyuta and those guys and Gad and that sort of thing. And then I immediately changed over to Yamaha, and my sound changed 100%.
That's one thing I want to discuss with you a little bit more. But I noticed in trend, though, did you happen to have very supporting parents? I noticed that is a very big trend in successful drummers. Were they supportive of musicians themselves?
Yes. So my parents were incredibly supportive. I was actually surprised how supportive they were because my dad was a hobbyist bass player. Mm-hmm. And he had there was a band in the 60s, I don't know if you've ever heard them, called the Critters. And they had a couple hits on the radio. And he almost played for them, which is funny. And he turned it down. I mean, we were just talking about it the other night, and I wanted to smack him. I'm like, you should have done it. But he was more of a hobbyist, and he was always more of a business guy at heart. Mm-hmm. And he ended up working on Wall Street for like 25 years.
Oh, wow.
And but he loved music, and my mom loved music, and they were into obviously the Beatles and Zeppelin and all the Motown stuff that I got to listen to when I was a kid and that sort of stuff. And so they were very supportive of music and of my talents and what I was doing, especially since I started young. They were like, he's really got something here. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, just on the other side of the coin, they were always saying, look, have a backup, make sure to do things right, go to school, maybe not just play, get into some other areas, that sort of thing. So I think that influence allowed me to be, really concentrate on this versatility thing that I have, mm-hmm. of not only just a lot of different styles, but getting into a lot of things, teaching, playing, writing, recording, all that kind of stuff that went through the gamut. So yes, they were very supportive. I had a soundproof room when I was a kid, downstairs in the basement, so yeah, absolutely 100%.
Yeah, that's one thing I noticed when I'm giving lessons myself, if the parents are all in, the kids more set up for success because it's a big time investment, emotional investment. They have to kind of accept that amount of noise in the household, yeah. And you can kind of feel out the parents, and that's a big part of it, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure. And I think also they both noticed that they were doing things in life that they maybe didn't love, mm-hmm. as much. Yeah. My dad at one point wanted to be an architect. My mom was trained to be a nurse and never went to get a job, mm-hmm. Because she was a stay-at-home housewife. And I think they sort of noticed that, and they noticed that my sister was also a world-class gymnast growing up.
Oh, really?
And yeah, and she was on the junior national team when she was like 16 years old. And so they started to see things in their kids that we really enjoyed at a young age and had a passion for. And I think that was part of them not putting up a fight and just sort of saying, let's see where this goes to, mm-hmm. And they're a little old fashioned, and it's funny, they're kind of younger, but they're old fashioned at the same time. Mm-hmm. And I'm kind of surprised how they didn't fight us on any of this, and they were really supportive because they could have easily have turned around and said, "You're not doing that. You're getting into this business," and they never did that.
Yeah.
And I'm very thankful for that.
Yeah, it's crazy how many different channels of life can just happen in a split second, and at an influence.
Sure.
But another thing when I brought up, you're a co-author of what book, and what books do you use to teach out of?
Okay, so I'm a big book person, but there are some people who are have rows and rows in a library of drum books, endless amounts, and I'm not like that, but I believe that there are a handful of books, a good 5 or 10 that you should really be that you should know like the back of your hand, and they're the usuals that a lot of people probably teach out of or know, like Stick Control, Syncopation, The New Breed by Gary Chester. I'm huge on that one. Afro-Cuban Rhythms for Drum Set by Bob Weiner and Frank Malabé. Master Studies, Will Coxon, the Snare Book, that kind of stuff. And of course, The Drummer's Bible by Jason Gianni and Mick Berry.
Oh, yeah, that's what I wanted to bring up.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, I mean, and there's a lot that have come out recently that are really good. Like Stanton Moore's book's really good. Some of his books are great. My friend Dave Stanek, Mastering the Table of Time is great. I mean, there's a lot of great. There was a time where just books were released and everybody would kind of be using the same thing. And I realize now that there's just so much great material out there for specifically what people are looking for too. So, nowadays it's like there are a couple of books that I use, like Syncopation and New Breed, that I blanket over everybody. But then when I teach somebody that has a certain specialty or is already advanced in a certain area or wants to learn a very special area, then I'll start to kind of get into those other books and say, hey, maybe we should check out the Chafee stuff. Or, hey, check out this snare, check out Podensky's snare method. This might be good for your starting classical stuff. Things like that. So I have to sort of have my finger on a lot of the other different resources, but I use very specific things myself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I wanted to give you a big compliment on your chart reading skills, because I just recently watched the video. I believe you were playing with a jazz band and Buddy Rich with the Marine or Navy. I could be wrong, but yeah, you could just tell the way your chart reading is just precise, and not a lot of guys can do that around right now.
Thanks. Yeah, man. I've been playing big band since I was 12 or 13 years old. Growing up, I never questioned. There's a lot of people that are like, hey, when did you get into jazz? But you're a rock player, or when did you get into Latin and you're a jazz player? Growing up, I never questioned that. I always knew that if I wanted to be a professional drummer, I had to go through the school systems. I had to go through the jazz bands. I had to study all this stuff. And I liked Buddy Rich's Time Being as much as I liked Hemispheres by Rush, as much as I liked, Michel Camilo's, first album, that kind of. There was never a time where I was just like, I only like this and everything else would go to hell. It was never like that, So one of the things, and I had a really good teacher in high school who was a drummer, and he got me a lot into big band, and I was into big band more than small band earlier on. It was later that I got more into like Miles Davis and Coltrane and that sort of thing. But growing up, I was reading charts since I was like 12 or 13. So actually, there's another book for people who teach or are listening. There's another great, I guess you could call it a book, by Jim Chapin in the late 60s called For Drummers Only. And it was one of the first drums minus one records. It was on record. And it was him playing hi-hat on 2 and 4 with a big band. And he wrote a whole chart system with it. So your students could play along with like a real big band. It's not digitally done or anything like that. And so I use that to teach and keeps my chops up too, still to this day, and that kind of thing. So, but yes, I played at PASIC with the Airmen and Note, and they threw me a Buddy Rich chart, and just did a little work at home and perform with them. No introduction. It was just kind of like, "Hi guys, how you doing? Sit down, boom, play, and you're done."
Yeah, that's definitely
and it was
a really good skill to have. Not many, like I said, I pay huge compliments to guys who can do that, because that's very like active thinking, on my opinion.
Well, you want to know the funniest and most ironic thing about that, which put a little nerves in me, is Peter Erskine played right before me.
Oh, wow.
And well, that didn't make me nervous as much as the song that I played was the song that Peter Erskine played with the Buddy Rich band at the last Buddy Rich Memorial Scholarship concert.
Talk about it,
So,
Craig.
it's like he's standing off to the side. I'm like, oh God, man, are you kidding me?
Well, you nailed it from what I saw. So, yeah, you definitely did a great job on that. But I don't want to leave. I want to talk about your drumming Bible book. How did that come about?
Actually, when I was auditioning for master's programs, I had put together a little package for the people that I was auditioning for that showed the way to teach different styles. Like if you wanted to teach Latin, you would do this bell pattern, and you wanted to do this conga pattern, and you do Pavino foot, and you put it together. And I started teaching Mick Berry, who was my co-author, in San Francisco, and I moved there. And we, talked. We studied together for about 2 years. And at one point, he goes, man, did you ever think about writing a book? And I said, ironically, I've always wanted to write a style book. There's a lot of style books out there that I felt like were not really accurate. If you ever looked at some style books, they give you 35 different ways of playing a mambo when there's only really one. There's ways of improvising off of that, but there's one or two ways that are sensible of playing it, and you go from there. And I said, Mick, ironically, I wrote this packet years ago when I was doing my master's degree. Let me show it to you, and maybe we can kind of spin it out from that. And sure enough, that's how the Drummer's Bible came about. We said, let's put together all these styles, but do them in a way where they're really accurate, where they give the student the right way to play a groove, one or two sensible variations, a history, and a lot of reading, and then of course a resource of listening and ways to get this stuff and hear this stuff and that kind of thing. And it really spun out and turned into an encyclopedia. It took 3 years to write and another year to do the second volume, which we did about a year or two back. Actually, it's probably about 3 years back. And it has sold wonderfully over the years, and it keeps going.
All right. Yeah, I don't think I checked it out, but what would be the best place to check that out or order it?
Amazon right now is the best, especially everything going on with COVID and people being home. Just go through Amazon. Make sure it's the second edition.
Okay.
Drummer's Bible second edition, and Amazon's the cheapest and fastest way to get it to you.
Yeah, I'll definitely put the link in there because I want people to check that book out as well as myself. But to change gears on you again, you mentioned that you switched to Yamaha due to Reckel and all the influences. How recent was that when you changed to the bigger fusion style Yamaha kits?
Cool. So the second I started hearing Weckel with the Chicoria band and with Michel Camilo, and also my friend Joel Rosenblatt, who played with Michel Camilo, I started hearing this very particular sound. We're talking about like late 80s, early 90s. That was like almost the only way I could describe it was like acoustic drums that sounded electric in a way, And I was like, what's going on there? What is that sound? And I started doing a little more research, and of course it was the new recording customs. And then I went further back and saw that Gadd was really the one that kind of really brought it to attention with the pinstripe heads. And I mean, he muted them down and muffled them and stuff, but that style, that sort of fusion-y rock jazz style, I'm like, this is what I've been looking for forever. And really, like, just overnight, I did a quick amount of research, found the setup that I like, which is an 8-10-12, 14-16. And one of my mom's friends owned a music store and said, I can get this kit for you, and I could get it at wholesale. Oh, nice. So sure enough, we got a 1990 recording custom in pearl white, which unfortunately faded, but I refinished it to a natural, and I still have it in my basement.
Nice.
And ever since then, I've been playing Yamaha. I've not stopped. It took me 17 years of going to NAMM, talking to everybody in the Yamaha, blah, 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 over and over and over to finally get signed by them,
nice.
As an artist.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a whole other conversation we have in 10 different interviews of how long it really takes to sort of make good relationships with the company and form long-term, business partnerships and sort of thing. But took 17 years, and you know Yamaha's a very selective company.
Oh yeah, and and the whole NAMM mentality. Everyone just wants to grab an endorsement in 30 seconds. It's not really the truth behind that. Like you said, that could be a really long form conversation of who they really want to put out there and represent their product. But yeah, we're kind of living in a culture where everyone just grabs the nearest endorsement, and it kind of irritates me in a way too as well.
Yeah, it should. It for the people like yourself who really know the real deal. It should really irritate you with the way that people think about endorsements. And again, I know we can get into this forever, but just the idea of like people thinking that the endorsement is sort of the end of the line, and they're famous and they're going to get all this free crap. And it couldn't be further from the truth, because an endorsement, first of all, remember that you endorse a company doesn't endorse you.
Yeah,
and it's really about how much you do for the company, for them to sort of kick back to you, and give you a favor.
They are a business at the end of the day. Regardless of who they are or who they have. So their bottom line and who they put out there and who they put money in advertising is a big deal.
Yeah, yeah. And when I got signed by Yamaha in 2010, I had a long discussion with them, and they were like, "Thanks for being patient. We know you've been talking to our A&R guys through the years, and now is the right time finally." And I thanked them and everything. And I said to them, now that we're together, and I've been with you guys basically many years before I signed here, what's the process with you guys to sort of select your artists to go to, say, the Modern Drummer Festival or the Montreal Drum Festival or something like that? And they said, well, basically it works like what you've been doing so far, is that if you're putting in the time and we start to trust you more, and it continues to build, that's how it gets to it. It's not an automatic thing where all of a sudden you sign with a company and you're on the cover of Modern Drummer.
Yeah.
That's not the way it works.
No.
And it has been proven, because I've worked very hard with Yamaha over the last 10 to 11 years. And I mean, I could tell you all the things they've done for me, and it's been wonderful, but it had to come from me first. That's the most important thing.
And one thing I want to ask, I noticed you do is you mix up your tom arrangements on the top. Was that you usually run your 10-inch in the middle, correct?
I've done it before. The video you saw online with the polyrhythms and ostinatos, I had it like that. I move things around quite a bit. Over the last year or so, I've been doing a lot of recording from home, just standardized recording, and I've kind of kept it natural, of just going, regular down the, 8, 10, 12, or just using the 10, 12, 14 or something. But if I start getting into more ostinato stuff or ambidextry, or dexterous type of patterns, I will do the 10 in the middle, the 8 in the middle, the 10 on the right side, the 12 on the left side, the 14 on the right, the 16 on the left. It's kind of like a Mangini setup, so that you're using the left side of the kit counterclockwise and the right side of the kit clockwise. But it's not a regular setup for me. It's just something I've experimented with.
Oh yeah, you make good use of it too. It's fun to watch. But while we're on that subject, you're playing the color type of it. Are you playing the 2002 model, or I know you're playing the red?
Oh, the Pisces, you mean?
Yeah, Pisces. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, no problem. I didn't know what you had said at first. So lots of different configurations of Pisces I have. When I'm out on the road, and especially it's like a rock thing or something a little heavier, I will play the like power crashes and sound reflectors and the reflector series and that sort of thing. When I'm in my studio and I'm recording, I'm usually doing the standard signature full crash.
Nice.
And then when I do more picturesque stuff or cooler gigs or that kind of thing, I'll throw the reds on, and I like the sound of the reds, but they're not they're a little lighter than most of the cymbals. They have a quicker decay, so to me they don't record as well as the full crashes, and I can't beat them up as much in a live situation. So I'll use them at home or in pictures or on maybe more closed in gigs or that sort of thing.
Now you mentioned Pisces, obviously more of a thicker cymbal. Do you feel like they cut through more of like a distorted setting easier for you?
Yeah, I've always been drawn to the Pisces sound because of their more high end. I always call it like a sizzly type of tone, and I have Pisces is a much more versatile company than a lot of people know of, because they don't quite often see a lot of the other things they had to offer in a Guitar Center or Sam Ash or something.
Yeah.
So like, their whole traditional line and Masters line, their darker cymbals are absolutely beautiful. They're like, the old Turkish cymbals. They sound gorgeous. So I have a whole set of those for my jazz gigs and, playing more dark. But typically when I'm playing live, again, in like a rock situation or recording at home, I'm using the, more like a higher end type of sound, like the full crashes or the signatures or that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that one, I primarily play Zildjian myself, but I have a 24-inch Pisces 2002, and I will not take it off. I won't take it off my setup. I feel like I live on that thing, and like I can't play without it. So I do have a back and forth relation with Pisces myself, but yeah, I feel like, their ride cymbals just nail it. There's something about that Bonham-esque, kind of cuts through, the 2002. That series is excellent from beginning to end, in my opinion.
I have a cool story about my ride cymbal. So I'm a huge fan of King's X and Jerry Gaskell.
Oh, nice.
And Jerry forever has used this 21-inch dry, heavy signature ride. And I've always loved that cymbal. And the bell is like hitting an anvil with a hammer. It's great. And I went a couple years after I got signed with Pisces. I was in their offices in LA picking out some cymbals, and I said to my A&R representative at the time, Andrew Shreve, I said, I really need to track down this ride. I need to get this ride. And he said, I have some bad news. We discontinued it. I said, oh my God. I mean, this is like been my dream ride. I had a 2002 like you, but 20-inch or something before. And I said, I wanted to upgrade to this. This is all I wanted. This, you know what? Hang on a second. So he brings me into the drum room, and if you've ever been to Pisces in LA, it's a large warehouse square room, and there's one drum set in the middle of the room, and there's cymbals on all walls surrounding the drum set, so that you just pull them off, try them out, put them back on the wall, that sort of thing. And there was one cymbal on this drum set. He goes, come over here. And the one cymbal that was on the drum set was the 21-inch dry heavy ride. And I went, oh my God. He goes, this is the one I'm going to give to you.
Oh, wow.
So not only do I have that in my collection, it's a cymbal that probably thousands of drummers have played on, because that was the factory ride that was on that kit.
Oh, nice. Yeah, it's definitely got the aura around it.
It's like, like angelic every time I get around it, kind of thing. So, yeah, it's very cool. Yeah.
And while we're talking about endorsement, is there anything you're looking forward to trying out in the future and kind of incorporating into your current setup?
I was much more into equipment years ago because, like you, I actually worked for a very short period of time. I worked retail when I was younger, and I really got into a lot of heavy equipment stuff and really knowing a lot of things. Since then, I haven't really kept up as much with equipment as much as I should. I mean, I certainly know what I want and what I want to try out, but there's some guys that are like complete gearheads, and I'm not quite as much as that. I would like to try out. Yamaha just came out with some really cool prototype brass snares that I was shown, and they are amazing. And I would love to try out and get a couple more snares in that respect, some different shells that I haven't had before. That kind of. I've been talking to Yamaha about maybe tricking out a snare and making it cool. Making it like a customized kind of thing. But right now I'm getting much more into like mixing and mastering and doing that kind of thing. So I would love to have a little more, try a little more on like the digital end of things, and see what I can get. How I could get better mixes and that kind of thing. But I don't really have anything very specific that I thought of from a drum perspective. I'd be like, oh, I want to try out.
I'm sorry, that's kind of a broad question, but yeah. I mean,
no, that's okay.
I always find myself longing for something else while I have something. It's kind of human nature. But are you currently playing a deeper snare or more of a piccolo style snare at the moment?
I have a 6. I've always played a 6 or a 6.5. I owned a piccolo that I ended up selling. I have a 12 by 5 or 5 by 12 popcorn off to my left sometimes. I have a couple different, snares here and there. I have an old style vintage Ludwig that's like a 5, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't really have a whole lot of other snares that I want to get or anything like that. The 6.5 by 14 or the 6 by 14 is sort of my home.
Yeah, nice. And to ask you, there's a song that you were part of that I kind of grew up listening to, and not many people probably know about you, but you were actually one of the writers on the SpongeBob theme, correct?
Right. Well, I actually, so I have to debunk that a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I actually did not write it.
Okay.
But I was there, but I recorded it. I recorded the drums,
mm-hmm.
and I was there when they put it together and produced it and the whole thing. Yes. So the story with that is, I was playing, as I lived in San Francisco for 10 years, and San Francisco went through a period of time in the late 90s where they were, and they still are to this day, they're a humongous advertising type city. There's a lot of ad agencies, like New York,
mm-hmm.
a lot of ad agencies, a lot of fashion, a lot of art, that kind of thing. Things have changed with the economy and people moving out of the city and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a studio that I hooked up with when I got there, and I went around to different studios and told them my resume and what I'm interested in doing and session drumming and that sort of thing. And the best studio that I ran into actually got back to me, and they said, "Would you like to come in and do a session for us?" Oh my God! I said to my wife, "I'm like, they're asking me to do a session." They said it's on Showtime. I said, "Oh my God, it's on Showtime!" And it turns out that it was one of those late night. Oh, Cinemax. Sorry, it was like one of those late night Cinemax like softcore porn movies.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wait, what? That like I was like, but it was very classy. It was very classy, and it was good music. It was like Bossa Nova and stuff like that.
Nice.
And from then on, I became their first call drummer.
Nice.
To doing tons of commercials and movie stuff, and international ads and national ads and all this type of stuff. So one day I got a call, and they said, "Would you like to come in and do this thing for Nickelodeon?" Now, I was living on the West Coast at the time where I had no family.
Mm-hmm.
All my family was still on the East Coast. And between friends and family, there was never really a time I could tell them, "Hey, watch this commercial." You don't know when a commercial is going to come on.
Mm-hmm.
But you would describe it to them. "Hey, I did this Coke commercial, and if you see this guy in a chair, that's me playing in the background," or something. But, it's hard for people to really pin that down.
Well, yeah, that's pre-YouTube where you could just share a link to anything. Times have changed.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, it was before YouTube and all that kind of stuff. And then sure enough, the studio called me, said it would be for Nickelodeon, and I got excited because one of the things I was like, "Hey, it was a pilot, and if you know anything about pilots,
mm-hmm.
they could go on for one time and disappear."
Yeah.
And I'll tell you a little story about that too. But my first thought in my head was, not only is it a theme song, but it's on Nickelodeon, and I could tell people every time it's on, "Hey, it's slated to be on 10 a.m. Saturday mornings.
Mm-hmm.
Watch this." So we get to the studio, and I see the introduction of SpongeBob. It's the animation is done, and I see the sponge exploding, and I'm like, "What the hell what am I doing? Like, am I on LSD? Like, what is happening here?"
Yeah.
And we lay it down, and they wanted sort of like a boom chick, boom chick, and I turned it into like a country train, like a chick, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And sure enough, so I knew it was going to be pretty big because it was on Nickelodeon, and the scene, was going to be a little weird and everything. About 6 weeks after the show had been aired a bunch of times and started showing reruns, my wife and I were at a water park, and I was sitting on at the bottom of like one of these large slides watching people go down, and I kept turning my head around. I kept turning it around and turning around. And my wife's like, "What is wrong with you?" I'm like, "You're going to think I'm crazy, but I'm hearing my cymbals." And she's like, What are you talking about?" And I'm like, I swear, I'm hearing me play. Yeah. All I heard was my cymbals. Mm-hmm. So I'm like trying to find this, and I'm walking around, and boom, this ride is blasting the SpongeBob theme.
Awesome.
And they have these SpongeBob towels and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, "Oh boy, this is like, whoa," Yeah. And sure enough, it became like, the biggest cartoon in the world, and it was Very interesting. So yeah. So I didn't really write any of it, but I was a part of it from the very beginning.
Well, that's definitely a big part of it. I wouldn't downplay that at all. But yeah, that turned out to be one of the most recognizable theme songs probably in the last 50 years, I'd say. Pretty much every kid gets excited.
One of my students is Mike Heller from Fear Factory. I don't know if you know Mike. Yeah. And he's a very, very close friend of mine. And whenever we're at NAMM together, he embarrasses me because he acts as my agent. And he goes, we'll walk around and he'll go, do you know that this guy's the most heard drummer in the entire world? I'm like, would you shut up? Like, just be quiet,
He's living vicariously through you. That's pretty cool.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, I wanted to give an honorable mention. You said you were the backup drummer for Trans Siberian Orchestra. Is that true as well?
Yes, that is, yep.
That's another big act, and I really wanted to bring that up, and that's one of the biggest stage shows in the world.
Yeah, so that came about through when I got to New York. A lot of things changed for me. Like I got into a lot of really cool circles, and a lot of people I got to know, and that sort of thing. And actually, that's actually how the Rock of Ages thing came about. A bunch of the guys in TSO were playing with Rock of Ages, and they kind of gave them my name. So I got contacted by Dina Fanai, who is a sort of the liaison, or the person who's kind of a scout for TSO, and said, "When can you come in and audition for us?" And I said, "Oh my God, I didn't even know you wanted me to audition for you." And I was I don't know what kind of music you listen to, but I grew up a big progressive fan and listening to a band called Sabotage, who was TSO before that. And so their big hit, Christmas Eve Stereo, that was a Sabotage song. And I had heard that 10 years before TSO came out. So when they contacted me, I went, "Oh my God, this is great. I really wanted to get involved with them." So it turned out that the way it worked with them was that Jeff Plate, who was the drummer of Sabotage, became the primary drummer of TSO. The act got so big, they splintered off into a West Coast and an East Coast band. My friend John O'Reilly ended up playing in the West Coast band for 10 years. It's now Blast Elias from Slaughter. And at the time, about 2013, 14, 15 or so, they started getting to their peak of popularity, where they were just making hand over fist money. The Christmas tours were just through the roof, and they started even doing spring tours. And they enacted early on a backup band, which really started to kind of gain momentum. And my friend Joey Casada, who was in a band called ZO2, was playing for a while, and he had to go on tour with ZO2. So for a couple of years, they needed a drummer. I auditioned, and I got the job. And I ended up playing a little bit on Night Castle, their platinum-selling record, in 2014, 15, or something like that. Nice. And if anything, besides my experience with them, which was great. Oh, by the way, the backup band has sort of dissolved now. We used to rehearse weekly in New York City, but it's not a part of that. They don't have that anymore. They have sort of just some people on call, like singers and backup guitarists and that sort of thing. But my time with them was just absolutely amazing, great experience, and it just spun into so many other circles and connections that I have, because it's such a big organization. So all my closest friends are in TSO, and I play with different configurations of bands. And Mark Wood, who's the original violinist of TSO, I play in his band regularly.
Oh, nice.
So it's just been one, it's been one just huge, circular connection, basically.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's definitely one thing I wanted to bring up. I know you're a busy guy today, Jason. You have some lessons to later, but I wanted to plug the best way to reach out to you and kind of get signed up for your lessons. What would be the best way to do that?
Cool. So anybody can reach me over email. It's jason@drummersbible.com, all lowercase, all one word, jason@drummersbible.com, and that's of course the book. I'm on Facebook as well, although I keep riding around that stupid 5,000 number or whatever. That drives me crazy. But you could personal message me on Facebook as well. I'm very active online and social media. But I'm not always posting. But as far as like the email and the Facebook thing, I'm always checking that and connecting with people. And now with the COVID thing, unfortunately, we're still in this situation. I'm doing the majority of my teaching from home, and it's actually been easier because I don't have to commute into the city. I'm about an hour commute to the city.
Yeah.
So my schedule's a little more open. If people want to connect with me, we can get on even just for 10 minutes and meet up and that kind of thing. It's been like a nice little breather in my life here of just a different way of doing things. So by all means, people can get in touch with me, and if they want to study, and we can do it that way.
And I want to recommend checking out your YouTube channel as well. Now, what was just under your name, correct? Jason Gianni?
Yep.
All right. Yep. Yeah, definitely. I'll definitely put the link in there. I highly recommend you check out some of his ostinato videos. I've learned quite a bit just from watching him the previous week. Jason, Thanks, I could have had you on for another 3-4 hours, but I know you got stuff to do, and I'd like to have you on again as well because I feel like we didn't even touch the surface of some of your history and your current events.
Yeah, I said it before, and I want to thank you and people like you who keep this aspect of the drum community going. I think it's important. The drum community, for those who have or haven't been to NAMM, is like a humongously beautiful big family. Mm-hmm. And we need these type of programs and podcasts and shows, especially now that we're not seeing each other, to really keep that relationship going. So I'm honored to be a part of your program, and yeah, let's do it again, man. I mean, hit me up anytime when you get done, after you get a bunch of other people on, and let's talk again for sure.
Well, with that being said, I appreciate it, Jason. With that being said, you can check us out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, and mainly YouTube. And if you enjoy it, please share with your friends and spread the words. It helps with the show. And once again, thanks guys for listening, and have a good one, Jason.
Thank you so much, buddy. Thanks for having me on.